Good evening. We're doing chapter 10 of Great Expectations. Um, I could catch you up because it's been a week, but let's just do the first paragraph and then catch up. The felicitous, that is not a, let's start all over again. Not promising. First, second word is a typo, is not promising. It's been a long day. Hopefully I can pick up some momentum now. The felicitous idea occurred to me being Pip, of course, a morning or two later, when I woke up, that the best step I could take towards making myself uncommon was to get out of Biddy everything she knew. In pursuance of this luminous conception, I mentioned to Biddy when I went to Mr. Wopsle's great aunt's at night that I had a particular reason for wishing to get on in life, and that I should feel very much obliged to her if she would impart all her learning to me. Biddy, who was the most obliging of girls, immediately said she would, and indeed began to carry out her promise within 5 minutes. So let me recap where we are. Pip, having visited Miss Havisham's, having met Estelle, Pip is now ashamed of his common working class origins because Estelle is so good, so adept at being cruel, because she's been trained by Miss Havisham. So Pip is on a mission to improve himself. And we know that he goes to the village school where Mr. Wopsle's great aunt is the mistress, and there's this person, Biddy, this young girl, Biddy, who, Pip is asking for basically, can you make me stand out more? Can you make me hide my class origins? And we know that Pip is on this growth journey. We know Great Expectations is this coming of age story. So chapter 10, we could say that the ground situation is laid. The inciting incident meeting Miss Havisham and Estelle has happened. There's also the inciting incident of Pip aiding and abetting the escaped convict. So all of that has happened, and now we're in the windshield wiper phase of the story, where there are ups and downs in our narrator's journey. So I think we can say we've exited the beginning of the book, and we're now firmly in the middle. As for me, today there was Memorial Day weekend, and this project has been going really well, but it's been a long day, and I could sense that as the time was approaching, I wanted to cancel. I was like, I could push it off, but I think this is why we do these durational projects. Is it doesn't matter if I'm feeling 50% or 25%, just showing up to the machine, typing, that's what I'm here for, and hopefully by doing it I'll pick up some energy. But if today there are more typos or less brilliant insight than you're used to, I apologize, and I'm a human being as well. The educational scheme or course established by Mr. Wopsle's great aunt may be resolved into the following synopsis. The pupils ate apples and put straws down one another's backs until Mr. Wopsle's great aunt collected her energies and made an indiscriminate totter at them with a birch rod. After receiving the charge with every mark of derision, the pupils formed in line and buzzingly passed a ragged book from hand to hand. The book had an alphabet in it, some figures and tables, and a little spelling. That is to say, it had once. As soon as this volume began to circulate, Mr. Wopsle's great aunt fell into a state of coma, arising either from sleep or a rheumatic paroxysm. The pupils then entered among themselves upon a competitive examination on the subject of boots, with the view of ascertaining who could tread the hardest upon whose toes. So really, it's just a chaotic schoolhouse with no education is taking place. This mental exercise lasted until Biddy made a rush at them and disturbed 3 defaced Bibles and distributed, I knew that wasn't right, and distributed 3 defaced Bibles shaped as if they had been unskillfully cut off the chump end of something. Cut off the chump end of something. I need to find out what chump end means. More illegibly printed at the best than any curiosities of literature I have since met with. Speckled all over with iron mold and having various specimens of the insect world smashed between their leaves. Lovely description of these books. This part of the course was usually lightened by several single combats between Biddy and refractory students. When the fights were over, Biddy gave out the number of a page, and then we all read aloud what we could. Or what we couldn't, in a frightful chorus. Biddy leading with a high, shrill, monotonous voice. and none of us having the least notion of or reverence for what we were reading about, when this horrible din had lasted a certain time, it mechanically awoke Mr. Wopsle's great aunt, who staggered at a boy fortuitously and pulled his ears. Fortuitously. This was understood to terminate the course for the evening, and we emerged into the air with shrieks of intellectual victory. It is fair to remark that there was no prohibition against any pupil's entertaining himself with a slate or even with the ink, when there was any, but that it was not easy to pursue that branch of study in the winter season on account of the little general shop in which the classes were holding, and which was also Mr. Wopsle's great aunt's sitting room and bedchamber, being but faintly illuminated through the agency of one low-spirited dip candle and no snuffers. I think we think of Dickens as one of the great chroniclers of urban life, but here we get some rural education or lack of described in his characteristic humor. It appeared to me that it would take time to become uncommon under these circumstances. Nevertheless, I resolved to try it. And that very evening, Biddy entered on our special agreement. By imparting some information from her little catalog of prices under the head of moist sugar, and lending me to copy at home a large old English D, which she had imitated from the heading of some newspaper, and which I supposed, until she told me what it was, to be a design for a buckle. So she sends him home with one letter to practice, and one letter at a time, here the letter D, he is going to become uncommon. I think it's a sweet sort of satire of how when you are of a particular class and you're attempting to make that class jump, you don't even know what you don't know. Of course, there was a public house in the village. And of course, Joe liked sometimes to smoke his pipe there. I had received strict orders from my sister to call for him at the Three Jolly Bargemen that evening on my way from school, and bring him home at my peril to the Three Jolly Bargemen. Therefore, I directed my steps. So this is a short paragraph that really changes the direction of the chapter. You know, we were with Biddy, we were focused on Pip and his mission to become uncommon, to impress Estelle, but suddenly it shifted and now he's off to the pub. There was a bar at the Jolly Bargeman with some alarmingly long chalk scores in it on the wall at the side of the door, which seemed to me to never be paid off. So these are people's tabs marked in chalk. They had been there ever since I could remember and had grown more than I had. But there was a quantity of chalk about our country, and perhaps the people neglected no opportunity of turning it to account. And I think you could read this in two ways. You know, obviously it's a joke about the quantity of chalk, but you could read it as there's no shortage of people going into debt across England at the time Dickens is writing. And I think they used to have debtor's prison back then. And if I'm not mistaken, I have to look this all up, but I think his brother was a serial debtor. It being Saturday night, I found the landlord looking rather grimly at these records. But as my business was with Joe and not with him, I merely wished him good evening and passed into the common room at the end of the passage, where there was a bright, large kitchen fire, and where Joe, who we all love at this point, was smoking his pipe in company with Mr. Wopsle and a stranger. Joe greeted me as usual with, "Hello, Pip, old chap." And the moment he said that, the stranger turned his head and looked at me. Whoa, who's this stranger? He was a secret-looking man, very odd adjective, whom I had never seen before, immediately ruling out the escaped convict. His head was all on one side, and one of his eyes was half shut up, as if he were taking aim at something with an invisible gun. So only one part of his face is visible. He had a pipe in his mouth, and he took it out, and after slowly blowing all his smoke away, and looking hard at me all the time, nodded. So I nodded, and then he nodded again, and made room on the settle beside him, that I might sit down there. But as I was used to sit beside Joe whenever I entered that place of resort, I said, "No, thank you, sir," and fell into the space Joe made for me on the opposite settle. The strange man, after glancing at Joe and seeing that his attention was otherwise engaged, nodded to me again when I had taken my seat, and then rubbed his leg in a very odd way as it struck me. So who is this weirdo? "You was saying," said the strange man, turning to Joe, "that you was a blacksmith." "Yes, I said it, you know," said Joe. "What'll you drink, mister?" "You didn't mention your name, by the by." Joe mentioned it now, and the strange man called him by it. "What'll you drink, Mr. Gargery?" "At my expense, to top up with." So he's buying Joe a drink. Why? That's the immediate enigma. Obviously, the other enigma is, who is this guy? "Well," said Joe, "to tell you the truth, I ain't much in the habit of drinking at anybody's expense but my own." "Habit? No," returned the stranger, "but once in a way, and on a Saturday night too." Good to know that Saturday night meant the same to them as it does to us. "Come, put a name to it, Mr. Gargery." "I wouldn't wish to be stiff company." What a classy way of accepting a drink. I love Joe. As I read this, as I'm reading this, Joe just gets better and better. "Rum." "Rum," repeated the stranger. "And will the other gentleman originate a sentiment?" "Rum," said Mr. Wopsle. They're all going to have some rum. "3 rums," cried the stranger, calling to the landlord. "Glasses round." "This other gentleman," observed Joe, by way of introducing Mr. Wopsle, is a gentleman that you would like to hear give it out. Our clerk at church. Aha, said the stranger, quickly and cocking his eye at me. The lonely church, right out on the marshes, with graves round it. So he's certainly signaling to Pip something that he knows something. So one might think that it's the escaped convict, but Pip says very clearly at the top of the chapter, I've never seen this man before. That's it, said Joe. The stranger, with a comfortable kind of grunt over his pipe, put his legs up on the settle that he had to himself. He wore a flapping, broad-brimmed traveler's hat, and under it a handkerchief. Tied over his head in the manner of a cap, so that he showed no hair. As he looked at the fire, I thought I saw a cunning expression, followed by a half laugh, come into his face. I am not acquainted with this country, gentlemen, but it seems a solitary country towards the river. Most marshes is solitary, said Joe. No doubt, no doubt. Do you find any gypsies now, or tramps, or vagrants of any sort out there? No, said Joe. None but a runaway convict, now and then. And we don't find them. And we don't find them easy. Eh, Mr. Wopsle? Remember, Mr. Wopsle went on the chase along with Joe and Pip to find the escaped convicts. Mr. Wopsle, with a majestic remembrance of old discomfiture, assented, but not warmly. Seems you have been out after such, asked the stranger. Once, returned Joe. Not that we wanted to take them. you understand. We went as lookers on, me and Mr. Wopsle and Pip. Didn't us, Pip? Yes, Joe. The stranger looked at me again, still cocking his eye, as if he were expressly taking aim at me with his invisible gun. Again, Dickens is reusing the same image. So, that's something that I've learned and noticed. He's a likely young parcel of bones, that. What is it you call him? Pip, said Joe. Christened Pip? No, not christened Pip. Surname Pip? And now we go back to chapter 1. So this is a callback. And we know we're in the middle of the book. Here we have a callback to chapter 1 and Pip's parentage and origin. And so this stranger is asking about it. Surname Pip? No, said Joe. It's a kind of family name. What he gave himself when an infant, and is called by. Son of yours? Well, said Joe meditatively. Not, of course, that it could be in any wise necessary to consider about it, but because it was the way of the Jolly Bargeman to seem to consider deeply about everything that was discussed over pipes. Well, no, he ain't. Nevy, meaning nephew, said the strange man. Well, said Joe, with the same appearance of profound cogitation. He is not, no, not to deceive you. He is not my nevy. So I think this is what Hollenbach would call a jamming. There's an enigma and a resolution, and a jamming is the delay of the resolution of the enigma. So this sort of drawn out conversation is a jamming. What the blue blazes is he? So here the stranger is taking liberties. Asked the stranger. Which appeared to me to be an inquiry of unnecessary strength. Mr. Wopsle struck in upon that, as one who knew all about relationships, having professional occasion to bear in mind what female relations a man might not marry, and expounded the ties between me and Joe. Having his hand in, Mr. Wopsle finished off with a terrifically snarling passage from Richard III. That's the one where Richard is evil, and seemed to think he had done quite enough to account for it, when he added, as the poet says. So this guy takes any occasion he can to quote Shakespeare. And here I may remark that when Mr. Wopsle referred to me, he considered it a necessary part of such reference to rumple my hair and poke it into my eyes. I cannot conceive why everybody of his standing who visited our house should always have put me through the same inflammatory process under similar circumstances. Yet I do not call to mind that I was ever in my earlier youth the subject of remark in our social family circle, but some large-handed person took some such ophthalmic steps to patronize me. And again, it stands out that Joe doesn't do that. So, Pip is sensitive to being patronized, and I do think young people in general are. And so Dickens is again showing a real intimate regard for what it's like to be young and constantly patronized. But we come to a beautiful detail from Dickens. I feel like the whole chapter has been building up to this. All this while, the strange man looked at nobody but me, and looked at me as if he were determined to have a shot at me at last. So continuing that same image, and bring me down, but bringing it and combining it with Pip's sort of paranoia. But he said nothing after offering his blue blazes observation, until the glasses of rum and water were brought. And then he made his shot, and a most extraordinary shot it was. So Dickens himself is signaling to us, pay attention, this is important. It was not a verbal remark, but a proceeding in dumb show, and was pointedly addressed to me. He stirred his rum and water pointedly at me, and he tasted his rum and water pointedly at me, and he stirred it, and he tasted it, not with a spoon that was brought to him, but with a file. And of course, I think, always objects have power in fiction. And Pip stole the file to help the escaped convict. And now the file has come around. Whether or not is the same file is immaterial. The point is this person, the stranger, is signaling to Pip, I know what you did. He did this so that nobody but I saw the file. And when he had done it, he wiped the file and put it in a breast pocket. I knew it to be Joe's file, so it is the same file. And I knew that he knew my convict the moment I saw the instrument. I sat gazing at him, spellbound, but he now reclined on his settle, taking very little notice of me, and talking principally about turnips. So here we see the energy has shifted. Pip, the man, was doing everything to get Pip's attention. He made the sign, and now the tables are turned. There was a delicious sense of cleaning up and making a quiet pause before going on in life afresh in our village on Saturday nights, which stimulated Joe to dare to stay out half an hour longer on Saturdays than at other times. The half hour and the rum and water running out together, Joe got up to go and took me by the hand. "Stop half a moment, Mr. Gargery," said the strange man. "I think I've got a bright new shilling somewhere in my pocket. And if I have, the boy shall have it." He looked it out from a handful of small change, folded it in some crumpled paper, and gave it to me. "Yours," said he. "Mind your own." Well, we know Joe's not going to steal it from him, but Mrs. Joe might. I thanked him, staring at him far beyond the bounds of good manners, and holding tight to Joe, he gave Joe good night, and he gave Mr. Wopsle good night, who went out with us. And he gave me only a look with his aiming eye. This is like 5 times that Dickens has used that aiming eye idea. No, not a look, for he shut it up, but wonders may be done with an eye by hiding it. On the way home, if I had been in humor for talking, the talk must have been all on my side, for Mr. Wopsle parted from us at the door of the Jolly Bargeman, and Joe went all the way home with his mouth wide open to rinse the rum out with as much air, because he's afraid of his wife, as possible. But I was in a manner stupefied by this turning up of my old misdeed and old acquaintance, and could think of nothing else. My sister was not in a very bad temper when we presented ourselves in the kitchen. And Joe was encouraged by that unusual circumstance to tell her about the bright shilling. "A bad un, I'll be bound," said Mrs. Joe triumphantly, "or he wouldn't have given it to the boy. Let's look at it." I took it out of the paper, and it proved to be a good one. So she's saying that it's probably counterfeit, or else he wouldn't have given it up. But it is a good one. "But what's this?" said Mrs. Joe, throwing down the shilling and catching up the paper. "2 1-pound notes," which was a lot of money at the time. "Nothing less than 2 fat, sweltering 1-pound notes that seemed to have been on terms with the warmest intimacy with all the cattle markets in the county." I'm not really sure what that means. I'll have to think about it. Joe caught up his hat again and ran with them to the Jolly Bargeman. So their first instinct immediately is to give them back. So you can see what an honest, moral, upstanding family this is. To restore them to their owner. While he was gone, I sat down on my usual stool and looked vacantly at my sister, feeling pretty sure that the man would not be there, because Pip knows that those notes were given intentionally. It was not an accident. Presently, Joe came back, saying that the man was gone, but that he, Joe, had left word at the 3 Jolly Bargemen concerning the notes. Then my sister sealed them up in a piece of paper and put them under some dried rose leaves in an ornamental teapot on the top of a press in the state parlor. There they remained, a nightmare to me. Many and many a night and day. So again, a very skillful way to move time forward by Dickens. But also, once again, we end the chapter by re-entering Pip's psychological state. So we had a lot of code of action, a lot of praxis, but the chapter ends inward. I had sadly broken sleep when I got to bed. Through thinking of the strange man taking aim at me with his invisible gun. Yet again, Dickens hits this image, and of the guiltily coarse and common thing it was to be on secret terms of conspiracy with convicts. A feature in my low career that I had previously forgotten. So this is so skillful for Dickens to knot together Pip's old fear, his conspiracy with the escaped convict, and tie it together with his current shame, that of being common, low class compared to Estelle. So very quickly and deftly, Dickens has tied these two together psychologically. I was haunted by the file too. A dread possessed me that when I least expected it, the file would reappear. And I think objects have a lot of power. They have a talismanic quality, and I think we underuse them a lot in fiction. And so here Dickens is showing the file has come up, in 10 chapters 3 or 4 times. I coaxed myself to sleep by thinking of Miss Havisham's next Wednesday. So this is such a simple paragraph, but it's so effective because it ties together Estelle and the escaped convicts psychologically for Pip, and it ends with setting up the sort of the rhythm and release of this story, where there's the past, there's Pip's past, helping this escaped convict, and there's the present, dealing with Miss Havisham. And we can feel the story has set up this cadence of moving between these two storylines. And it's all tied together in this paragraph to close out the chapter. And in my sleep, I saw the file coming at me out of a door without seeing who held it. And I screamed myself awake. Poor Pip. State of horror. But I think this is a very, very effective image. The file coming out and the enigma, who is holding it. So a shorter chapter, all things said and done, but a really good one, and full of mystery. And we went to a fun British pub, the Three Jolly Bargemen, and makes me want to go to a pub. But thanks everyone for joining, and I'll pick it up on Thursday of next week. Thursday of this week, so day after tomorrow, we'll do chapter 11, and we'll keep this project moving along. And to everyone in the future who follows along, thank you for your support.